Hi everyone, I wanted to talk a little bit more about my trip to China. It was a lot of fun, and I think that one of the really great ways for you to get a good idea of what's in China is to watch a lot of videos from expats and other people touring China. So that's what I did before I went. So I had a pretty good idea of what China was going to be like. There wasn't a lot of big surprises other than that being there in real life was 10 times more amazing than anything I saw on TV or on YouTube. Basically, everything I got was on YouTube or from Facebook, but most of it was from YouTube, from people in China just going around videotaping and talking about their experience in China. That's pretty much how I've gotten to know everything about, the boots on the ground in China. And so starting from there, I had seen the Great Wall, I'd seen it in books, I'd seen it with people videotaping it, but I'd never been there in real life. And like I said, it was far more amazing in real life than it was on a videotape. So you'd think that the Great Wall is just a wall. It's just a bunch of bricks, right? Why was it amazing? I don't know. I mean, being there in real life, it's actually, the feeling of the grandeur of it all. It's huge. And the beautiful scenery around it. So you're looking over the walls of the Great Wall, and you're seeing these beautiful hills, green hills, and you're seeing that's just really stunning, especially when you walk in one of the little corridors. There's little, corridors, at little stations. I'm not sure what they're called. I should know since I've been to the Great Wall, but I don't know these little stations where, they would have like a tiny little house, and just walking around those is pretty amazing. And just seeing how tall it was. And, frankly, I'm looking at it, I'm like, you could scale the wall, but I can see how it's far more difficult to scale the wall than it is to just walk across the ground. So I can see how it would be a very big protector of the country. And so then one of the things about the Great Wall is that I did not expect the museum by the wall to be pretty, like a lot of the people that I went with weren't too interested in the museum. And I was like, are you kidding me? This is like awesome. So, if you go to the Great Wall, be sure to check out the museum. It's just kind of a 3D experience. It's pretty neat. Also, then after the Great Wall, we went to the streets in Beijing because I landed in Beijing. I went to a park in Beijing. It was a really nice park. I did a video of the park, but unfortunately, what I was trying to do in the park was I had started by a speaker, but you can't hear the speaker in the video. But there's some nice calming, like meditative music coming out of the speaker. So it wasn't everywhere. It was very soft, but if you were to sit in certain areas, you would have had this quiet ambiance. And it was very well groomed. It was very well maintained. As you can see in the video, there were some, just people walking around. It was very, very peaceful. And then one of the nights in Beijing, we went to an acrobats show. I will try to put the name of the acrobat show in the link below, but it is really nice. If you go to Beijing, don't miss out on the show. And one of the things about Beijing is very, very safe. The most dangerous time that I found during my trip to Shanghai, to China, as I talked about in another video, is basically when I landed back in LA. That was the most dangerous part of my trip to and from Shanghai, was when I landed back in America. The whole trip in Beijing is very safe because you don't have people on drugs. It's people on drugs that really make things very dangerous, and people with guns. You don't have people on drugs, you don't have people with guns, so it's very, very safe. It's probably, as a solo female traveler, that is probably the safest place you can go, is to China. You can, like, I was walking around in, there's, like America, China has poor people and rich people. And I was walking around poor neighborhoods completely safe because there's not anybody that is out to get you like there is in America. So we went to the acrobat show, and it was very fine. Also, there's when we left Beijing, we went to Xi'an. So I did the Easy China tour. It's actually, you can Google that. It's a very inexpensive tour, probably no more expensive than paying for the hotels yourself. So I did that. So during the day, you'll have activities, and in the evenings, you'll have your own thing that you can do. You can go out for lunch, couldn't go for lunch in the evening. You can go out for supper. You can go to a show, you can do whatever you want, or they have some optional activities you can do as well. So you're going to have things to do during the day, and then the evening, as a solo female traveler, I was typically alone. But then for the tour, we went from Beijing to Xi'an. That was the tour that I chose. You can just email them. I think there's a few other. I would suggest using a tour company that's located in China, because then you get, it's far less expensive, and you also get more of a real life experience. That's what I actually like. Some people like more of a luxury tour. I want to know what it's like in China, so I took the China tour. And so then my tour that I had requested was to go to Beijing, see the terracotta, and to see the Shanghai Pearl Tower. So we went from Beijing and then to Xi'an. Xi'an is where the terracotta were. So we took the high-speed train. So the high-speed train goes to 217 miles per hour. So 217 miles per hour is 350 kilometers per hour. And that is pretty fast. Why don't we do that in America? Because to have a high-speed train, you have to lift it off the ground significantly so. If you don't lift it off the ground, you're going to be continually unaliving drivers. You're going to be unaliving large animals, buffalo, deer, bear, you name it. You're going to hit these animals because it's a high-speed train. These animals don't think about what's coming down at 350 kilometers per hour, because they have not been evolved to think of that way. So in order for it to be safe for the passengers and for the animals and for the other cars, you have to build it very far off the ground. And the high-speed trains in China are very far off the ground. I don't know how far they are off the ground. You feel like you're flying, but you're not. You can look up online how far they are off the ground. So we can't really do that in America unless we were to have that big infrastructure. And if you've looked at high-speed trains online, they're also known as bullet trains because, they go fast like a bullet. You will notice that they run at a financial loss a lot of times. So they're basically for the convenience of the people. They're not a money-making venture. So for a private enterprise to take on something that they know that they're going to lose money on is highly unlikely in America. So you kind of have it has to be a government venture, because it's not going to pay for itself. It's not going to make a profit. It's not, it's just something that's, a government provided thing. So when I took the train ride from Beijing to Xi'an, it was beautiful, right? So in the other video, I described the vegetation of China to be somewhat like Minnesota and Wisconsin. I would kind of like the nuance of that is that I would say it's almost a little bit more like Wisconsin than it is like Minnesota. So Minnesota has both prairie and high vegetation. I mean, there's more than one climate in Minnesota, but for the most part, it's high vegetation. It's very lush, like Hawaii, very lush because it's kind of tropical during the summer. There's a lot of rain, there's a lot of water. Wisconsin's differentiation from Minnesota is that Wisconsin has a lot of cliffs. It has a lot of blind cliffs. So it's very beautiful in that way. I really love driving through Wisconsin. It's very beautiful. And so Xi'an, the trip from Beijing to Xi'an, was much like Wisconsin, that there was a lot of these beautiful lime cliffs. So limestone falls apart quickly relative to other forms of stone. So what you get is a lot of fresh stone curing its side out, and with green vegetation growing around it. It's very beautiful. And so that was the scenery on the bullet train from Beijing to Xi'an. So then we went to Xi'an and we saw the terracotta soldiers. Again, seeing it online, seeing it in books is very different than the real life experience. So she said, basically the times that we are out touring these things, they're during work hours. So we're not actually even seeing the big crowds that one might see on holidays or weekends. So even during those work hours, it was still very crowded. This is like a big deal to go to the terracotta soldiers. There's a lot of people there. It's amazing to see. And they talk about the tour guide talked about the way that the reason why the terracotta soldiers were created is because it was actually prior to the terracotta soldiers, there was this belief system that in order for the king to take the soldiers with him into the afterlife, they had to be unalived. And somebody advised the king that there's a different way. We don't actually have to unalive all of these soldiers. We can make an exact replica of them in clay. or terracotta. I don't know, what's the difference of those. But if we make an exact replica of them, you don't actually need to unalive them. We can leave them to be alive and live out their lives as long as we have this replica buried of them with you. And so this was kind of revolutionary, kind of a change in the way things are done. Unfortunately, I guess some people were also still, it wasn't still, a utopia, but it was a big improvement from the past belief system. So that was pretty neat. The tour guide talked about that. And then we saw all of that in Xi'an. We went to the bell tower as well, and we saw, everywhere that we went. I forgot where we first landed in Beijing. I'll go back to that. Everywhere that we went, there were young ladies and a few young men, probably 10 to 1 of young ladies to young men, were dressed up in traditional attire and taking their pictures. And you could actually rent outfits and do that yourself if you wanted. And so everywhere I go, there be these beautiful women and interesting looking fellows that were dressed up in the traditional attire. Very cool experience to see this in these traditional places, right? So I totally forgot about going to Tiananmen Square in Beijing. So I'll go back to that. Tiananmen Square, it's not just Tiananmen Square, but if you go to that, you'll also see the Forbidden Palace, which is kind of adjoined, not maybe adjoined, but close to. So we went to Tiananmen Square, very neat. Of course, just like a lot of the other areas, the vegetation was very well manicured. So it was beautiful. And there was fountains, and then we went to the Forbidden Palace, and that too was really neat to see. And they had these giant kettles that were basically just to hold water in the event of a fire. And so underneath the giant kettles, there was a little space to put a fire so that the water wouldn't freeze, because Beijing is kind of like, Minnesota, Wisconsin, in the fact that it gets very cold and the water freezes in the winter. So the whole Forbidden Palace was awesome. That takes several hours. It's a big workout. And then we went to the Summer Palace, which was amazing. It was next to a body of water with some, from Minnesota, I love bodies of water. It's not really a park until there's a body of water, right? That's kind of the thought process here. And so there was lots of little paddle boats you could get. If I had the trip to do over, I would spend another day at the Summer Palace, because I could have spent all day at the Summer Palace. I thought it was amazing. I would have loved to take one of those boats out. So anyway, so back to the trip. So then we went to Terracotta, and then I took a plane to Shanghai. So in the plane trip, the train, the entry fees to all of these were included in the hotels and lunch. All of this was included in the price of Easy China Tour, which for a single woman was about 1.5, so $1,500 for this tour. So you get a lot. You get a bang for your buck, to do all of this. You're getting the hotels every night. You're getting breakfast and lunch, and all of the entry fees, and all of the train fees, all of the plane trips. All of this is included in the price. So then I landed in Shanghai, and I told them one of the things I really wanted to see was the Oriental Pearl. So I've seen so many pictures of the Oriental Pearl, but I was shocked. I was like, none of the pictures I've seen do it justice. Being there in person and seeing it, it's actually really beautiful. It's kind of like sparkly and it's beautiful. I don't know the purpose of the Oriental Pearl. It just seems like it wouldn't be a very functional building, but I don't know. Maybe I should look it up and figure out what the Oriental Pearl is all about and what it was built for, but it's beautiful. And so then I saw that, but then they really wanted me to go see the Shanghai Tower. So I went to the Shanghai Tower, and that was actually quite an experience. But if you have ear problems, the Shanghai Tower goes up so fast that my ears were giving me problems, like a lot of problems. And I do have ear problems. That's just genetic. I have small canals. And so that would be something that you'd want to think about. It's not like they popped or anything, or like I, blew my eardrum or anything. It wasn't like that. It was just very uncomfortable for like half an hour after riding the elevator. So the elevator goes very far up, and then you can see the surrounding area. I'm afraid of heights, but it didn't bother me. So it wasn't a scary portrayal of the outlying area. But I could see, the buildings below it. And then we walked around downtown Shanghai. We walked, because in Minnesota, we have a bit of a skyway, so that we don't have to walk outside all the time, especially during winter. This is very important. But in Shanghai, they also kind of have like a walkway that goes through all of the malls. So in order to get to the main, downtown area, after we got out of the Shanghai Tower, we walked through some of the downtown area. We walked through some really gorgeous malls. We walked through just some, basic, you can kind of see how the area is very groomed. Again, the vegetation is always very groomed. That just makes it a really pleasant area to be around. We saw the dragon escalator, which is, just I took a picture of just to kind of to portray some of my experience in Shanghai. That it's gold, it's glittery, it's very high end, it's very nice. And the dragon escalator just kind of goes up like in a circle, and you're kind of riding this escalator all the way up, and it's on both sides, and then plus you have an elevator in the middle. And just very beautiful. And I think that the highlight was probably, I'm an outdoorsy person, so to say that Shanghai was my highlight is it's hard to explain why. I think just the grandeur of it, the beauty of it, just the feeling of safety and cleanliness, and it's just gorgeous, right? You've always, a lot of people have had nice experiences in nice restaurants, but to have like the whole street be like this, and to have like the whole mall be like this, it's really, really neat. I just really loved Shanghai. But I also love the vegetation. If you have allergies were one of my biggest problems, and the food is another big one. I would say the Shanghai was supposed to be, I heard it was basically rice and vegetables and meat. But basically, in my experience, it was noodles and meat. Wheat noodles and meat were the main cuisine in Beijing, Xi'an, and Shanghai. So if you go there, if I had to do it over again, one of the first things I would be doing would be thinking about, after the tour is done during the day, since you have the evenings off, to get an Uber, they're DDs, to a restaurant with vegetables, because I went without vegetables nearly the entire trip. There really wasn't vegetables on the menu anywhere. I mean, not to the degree that I eat vegetables. And I don't like to eat the fruit, because I did see spitting. I saw people spitting, and that kind of threw my entire appetite for anything raw, frankly. Because I was like, well, why are they spitting? How much do they spit? Do they spit in the kitchen? So the spitting kind of ruined my appetite for anything raw. So, anything that was raw fruit, raw vegetables, that was going to be off the menu for me. So if they did serve raw fruit and raw vegetables, I wasn't going to eat them, because I did see people spitting. So, so the things that are left basically are just not a lot of healthy options for me. There's eggs and yogurt. Yeah. That's kind of the options. And coffee. And they don't really offer a lot of coffee. They put coffee in tiny little cups, which is, to me, it's like, well, coffee's like the cheapest thing on a buffet. So usually in America, they're like, hey, load up on the pop, load up on the coffee, because they know it's basically free. It's like 10 cents a cup if they look at the, the cost per cup of these things. So they usually, in America, they usually supply ample amounts of coffee, but in the entire trip in China, it was just like, there were small cups, and you had to go to a machine, and you had to stand in line. It was just really hard to get just a cup of coffee and salt. Like, there's no salt on the tables. So my electrolytes were out of whack. Luckily I had, not luckily, fortunately I had brought some salt packets from home, worried that electrolytes are going to be an issue. And they were. So if I hadn't had my salt packets from home, I would have been really up a creek. So I would suggest, yes, bringing a lot of electrolytes, because you're not going to have salt at the table. And, bringing a lot of protein bars, and planning ahead for your evening meal so that you get something that is more well-rounded, and so that you can get some more vegetables in your diet. I'm not knocking Chinese food. I'm sure if people came to America, they'd be, off put by, some of the things like in Minnesota, we eat a lot of, basically all of our food is very high fat in Minnesota. And that's the way I like my food. And I think my body has adjusted to being kind of high fat. Like we cook a lot of things. Like when I lived in California, I thought all the food was dry, because they don't cook things in oil. It was very, very dry and very unpalatable to me, a lot of the California food. So it's not knocking California. It's just that I'm very not used to that. I do have the more, Minnesota, when we started out, the first cuisine influence that we have is actually French. That was like the French was the first one. So the French are rich, they have rich foods. And that had kind of like the undertone. The Midwest kind of got an undertone. When the French people came to Minnesota, they started cooking with, very rich foods. So they're often buttery and sweet, kind of a sauce to it. So that all of the Minnesota Midwest food kind of has that undertone to it. And then we had some Irish people move in with a lot of potato and very hearty things. And then we had, I think Norwegian and Scandinavian type of gave us some lutefisk too. But I think, a lot of the Midwest, what they did was that the French and then the Irish kind of combined it with the local Native American, the Ojibwe and the Mdewakanton Sioux. Their type of cuisine was more of a squash and wild rice and fish, and you kind of mix that with the French, and then you add some Irish to it, and that's how you get this really rich, almost sweetish flavor of the Midwest. It's very, very different than China, which is more of a spicy noodles and meat type of thing. So it's a very different adjustment for me, and I think lack of that type of hearty food that my body has adjusted to all of my life really did weaken my body. So if I had to do it over again, I would first prioritize taking the Didi to a local restaurant and, and making sure that I research the restaurant to get some more food that's a little bit more hearty for my Midwestern body. And so then the Alipay is absolutely necessary. I did have VPN, and a lot of my apps did not work without the VPN. I do respect when in Rome, do as the Romans do. It's an old saying, but I think it really applies to going to China or going to any country that I respect the local customs. So I'm not going to do anything nefarious with a VPN. I just did it so that I could navigate their system, because I don't know how to use any other apps that don't work with a VPN. I need to use the Google Maps to be able to get around. And, I need to be able to communicate with my family. And so that's all I used it for. And so I would, I'm addicted to YouTube. So maybe I did a little bit of scrolling on that, but, I do respect the customs of the country that you go to. I'm very, I feel this is a very, very value of mine. But I did need a VPN, for those functions. But the VPN, if that's running, Alipay does not work. I used T-Mobile International. That actually is a very good plan. It's $50 a month, and then you don't have to worry about roaming or anything. And then you can still use Alipay. Alipay, you can pay for anything. Make sure that you have something that's compatible in China hooked up to your Alipay. So if you hook up Discover, unfortunately, I don't think Discover works in China. So even if your Alipay accepts Discover itself, I don't think will work in China. So even if it's hooked up to your Alipay, even if you're just using Alipay, I don't think it's going to work in China. I think you have to use Visa or MasterCard, hook that up to your Alipay, and then you can use that. And the Didi app did not work in China. Neither time I've been to China twice, and neither time did my Didi app work in China. But the Didi app component in Alipay did work. So open up your Alipay, open up your Didi, and then you can book a ride. And then when you book a ride, you can, right after you book a ride, check out the driver and make sure that the driver is compatible with something you feel comfortable with. I didn't have a problem with that. The first one didn't have any, it was like a new guy. So then I canceled that one. The second time I opened up Didi a while later, I found somebody that was more experienced. So then I went with that. So then the Didi app with the driver. I felt very comfortable. They did not, when people talk about, hey, when you're in Shanghai, other people speak English. No, nobody speaks English in Shanghai. Nobody speaks English in China. Not even the tour guides, okay? Don't think you're going to be able to go to China and speak English. I would say learn a few phrases, right? So the tour guides, they could speak English, but when I asked them a question, they often did not understand my question. They would answer it in ways that don't really make sense. So even though they did speak English quite fluently, you're not going to have an in-depth conversation with them, and you're going to have a lot of misunderstandings. You'll want to make sure that you text back and verify everything that they said in writing, because there was a few miscommunications. So don't go to China think that people are going to speak English. They don't. Okay? Go to China expecting to use Google Translate. I had to get some, since I had bad allergies and it worked up. They got really worked up when I was in Shanghai, Beijing, and Xi'an. I went to the local pharmacy and I picked up some diphenhydramine, which is another word for Benadryl, which is the generic term for Benadryl. And I was able to go there and I was saying, diphenhydramine. The pharmacist knew what I was talking about. She picked up some diphenhydramine. I took my little Google Translate and took a picture. If you go to Google Translate and you say camera, and then you can scan over the words, and I confirmed it was diphenhydramine. I confirmed the dosage, and then I was able to take that. And then, to supplement my diet, I went to the local store and little convenience store and picked up some rice cakes and some peanuts and other things, right? And that's what I ate in the evenings. You don't want to be too hungry. You won't be able to sleep. So that's all my tips, I guess. And I really thought it's something amazing. It's really actually a cheap vacation, all things considered, compared to other countries. I guess depending on what countries you go to. It was an amazing experience, far better than I'd ever thought. It's a very safe place for women to go. And despite the tour guides not being able to have a conversation, they all seem to have good hearts, right? They all seem to be doing things and having everybody's best interest in mind. So just be prepared for the food. I've heard that from other people too. Some people love the food, some people don't. And there's not a critique on whether the food is bad or good. It's just that you may not like it. You may not be used to it. It may not be good for your system, right? It may not be something that's palatable to you. Everybody has their tastes and preferences, not good or bad. But I wish that I would have understood this more before going to China, to get a list of really good restaurants and to try out some other cuisine. If I had been more intentional on that in the evenings, not only would my health have been better, but I would have had a better experience with the food. I probably would have found some food that I really did like, because the local vendors and the local restaurants around the places, because I went with the Easy Tour, it's, less expensive, but it's also, in 3-star hotels. So the hotels are safe. Everything's safe in China, but maybe not in the best, not high-end restaurants around you. So if I had visited more high-end restaurants, since the restaurants around our hotel were all noodles and meat, noodles and meat, noodles and meat, there wasn't differentiation. And so I kind of wish that I would have, been more intentional in exploring the cuisine, because I'll bet if I had done more exploring with the local cuisine, that I would have found a lot of things that I really love. Just like if somebody came to the Midwest, they might try out one restaurant and be like, ugh, I don't like that. It doesn't mean you don't like all the restaurants here. It just means you tried a few and you didn't like them. And that's just like around here too. I mean, I don't like every restaurant that I've ever been to in the Midwest. But I like some, right? And so learning which ones that you like takes some experimentation, exploration. And I wish I would have spent more time doing that. So that's, I hope this is helpful. If you do want, if you are a female and you want to solo travel, I think China is a good place to go. But of course, the safety is on you to, register with the U.S. Embassy, tell them when and where you're going to be, tell everybody, where you're going to be. And I did take, I had a little purse underneath my shirt, and my purse had a note with emergency contacts. I know people in China because I've been doing the Tandem app and I've met people in China. Put the emergency contact of a local person and a person in the United States, so that if something were to happen to your body and they lift up your shirt and you have this little placard that says, placard that's waterproof. I just put it on a Post-it note and I put it in a little plastic case. These are my emergency contacts. So if anything did happen, if I got hit by a bus, literally, and I went to the hospital, eventually they're going to find this little emergency contact information right on me, right? And so that's one thing to make sure to do, right? Yeah, I think that's all I have for today. Hope this is helpful. All right, thanks.